This isn't your soft launch. This is the hard launch, where we talk about what it takes to build love, businesses, and everything in between. Sarah, it is so great to have you here. What an honor to have you on the pod. You are the founder and CEO of Mostest, an AI-powered event planning platform. And over the past several years, you've been growing the company, which most recently led to the launch of Mostest 2.0, doubling the company's valuation, which I am so excited to dig into with you. You also stay deeply connected to real event planning work by planning events yourself and started out as an event planner before going all in on Mostest. Also something I can't wait to dig into with you. You're also a mom of 3 while you're building this company and growing your family at the same time. I'm excited to unpack what 0 to 1 actually look like and how AI is changing the future of events and event planning. So are you ready to get into it?
I am pumped to get into it. Thank you for having me, and I'm excited to unpack all things, starting with my 3 bosses, but also, future of weddings and AI, and, at Moses, we just love what you're building. So it's a total honor to be here and to mind meld together. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. And yes, I know how it goes. The real bosses are the ones that somehow are in our house and made from us. We've created monsters because they're our
Tiny,
actual
tiny
bosses.
bosses. Yes,
Exactly.
exactly. Totally.
um, awesome. Well, walk us through initially. I'd love to talk about how you first got into event planning, planning events yourself. What did that look like in the early days?
Oh, it's a great question. So the truth is that I had been thinking about Mostest as a concept since 2017, but it took me a few years to actually get started. But the first time that I really felt as though I needed a Mostest in my life was planning my wedding. And then from there, my career in fashion grew tremendously, and I was very lucky to take on more responsibility. But I also found myself planning tons of events all the time. And, it felt interesting to me, I guess, as a starting point, that there wasn't really an option for me. And obviously, this is before AI really got into the mix. So it was truly like Googling it yourself, figuring it out, or having a professional event planner. And the thing that I found most interesting was that I was at a big company. The company I worked for before starting my own venture was Adidas. So tens of thousands of employees. Obviously, they have an events team. And even in the construct of a big company that had an events team, as they manage different businesses and wore different hats, sometimes events were in scope for the events team, sometimes they weren't. And the construct and infrastructure as they made these decisions, I just found really interesting because it left what I saw as a very high percentage of events that the company was doing that did not have any support whatsoever. So if you think about a company, especially like global company like Adidas, they're very clear on their goals and their KPIs, they're publicly traded. And so thinking about their KPIs specifically and how these events in my role were in a way taking me away from delivering what I was committing to deliver to the company. It just became something I was really fascinated with. It felt like there had to be a better way. And so I actually got started by taking a couple of entrepreneurship courses at HBS Online. I obviously had a full-time job. I was growing my family. So I did not do a traditional MBA path or an MBA at all. But it was something that during the pandemic, allowed me to stretch my thinking. And from there, I got started as an event planner in market. And the purpose of that was to validate this idea that there could be potentially an option for something in between what a traditional planner is and what maybe someone with a lower budget or a lower budget, higher frequency event cadence like me at Adidas, where we could have sort of that a la carte experience and support that was very highly tech enabled. And so I got in market as a planner slash coordinator, and I planned and coordinated weddings for a few months until I was like 8 months pregnant with my third, basically. And then,
I
yeah.
love that. I feel like we have really similar origin stories because, like, you and I were like going down the same path at the same time. We just never knew each other. But I feel so like I feel like the stories and the origin stories and how we kind of landed on the idea that it is that we're building are stemmed from such a similar place, because I too was working full time and growing my family, but from my own wedding saw the massive gap and opportunity in the space, being such an underserved market and technology not innovating in this space for decades. And I feel like you and I both started building these startups before it became like this trendy hot thing to build an AI startup, which now I feel like everybody and
We
anybody
didn't
is
have the
like, it's like,
words.
yeah, we
We
didn't
we
even
were
know
like,
what that
"Tech
was.
should do this." We don't know what it's called, but tech should do this. This is repetitive and
Exactly.
not, obviously, a lot of event planning is a craft and an art, but what I was doing is calling Bolero to, like, get a nacho bar situated for an account. I'm like, "That was admin. That should be AI fully."
Yes, but
Yeah,
it was before we knew that AI could even do that, and I think that it's
correct.
so cool that we like, you see the opportunity, you see the gap before you even know what the solution could be or should be, and that solution evolves and iterates over time. You really start by, like, identifying this, like, massive gap, whether it's from personal experience or maybe even, like, professional experience, but I think it's so interesting that you went through such a similar evolution as I did, to land on what ultimately has been something that has evolved over time. But that whole process in itself, like just figuring out the problem, figuring out what the solution should be, validating that, like that takes years. And I think a lot of times people don't understand how long that truly takes. It's not something that just like happens overnight and, you like started building and realized that there was a problem and here's the solution. It really takes time.
I mean, we're still building. We're
Yeah.
still testing. I like to say we're in the zip code of product market fit. I think the power of a good brand is people think you're bigger than you are. We're very much still building and testing.
Mhm.
The call I actually just had right before this was all about iteration of the current and future product. And I think that actually what makes this like the job of my dreams is that it is always changing. One of the things I learned about myself was that that creative aspect for me is incredibly fulfilling. Obviously stressful and can be tumultuous and I'm sure you feel this, you have to rein yourself in sometimes, but I love that and it's never over. You never like have the product and then
It's never over.
there's no silver bullet. I think that's something people don't say enough and I think you hear these really romanticized stories of startup life, and, like, most of them, you're missing 80% of the story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't get to see what the evolution was and like what it took to get to that point. And to your point, you reach a point and then there's like this massive hill ahead of you that you still have to climb and still have to like overcome. And it's a
Yeah,
constant process of what is the next milestone, what's the next iteration, what's the next thing we need to get over.
and it changes with the user, your users expand, they change. I had a leadership coach and a mentor from a VC tell me, and it's so, like, you hit it so the nail on the head, like, she talked about scaling walls in startups, and basically working in a startup, whether you're the founder or growth or really whatever, you are constantly just scaling walls. That's the difference. You're not going and you're not in a job that's consistent and steady. Like, yes, in the sense of like you show up, hopefully 5 days a week and whatever else, but like it's the walls are different and you have to have the mentality of constantly really understanding that the job is actually to scale a different wall every, X amount of time.
I'm
And
going to
it's a
take
it's a bit
that
of a
with
paradigm.
me.
Oh
Scaling
yeah.
walls.
I did
I
not
just
make
say
that up.
climbing
Shout out
mountains,
to
but
Jess.
scaling walls, it's all the same and I love it.
Shout out to Jess Rosen. Well, yeah, thank you for that. But for me,
Exactly.
it, like, gave me the perspective. I'm like, "Yeah, that makes sense. That is how that feels."
It's exactly how it feels. What was the moment where you realized for yourself that like event planning was not just a creative outlet, but it was truly like a problem, a systemic problem that you wanted to solve for? Was there an inflection point where that happened, or was it truly over time and over the years that you were in the space and evolving yourself in this space?
So twofold. The moment that I really became convicted to build was actually a personal moment. So we've hit on, I'm a mom, and I had a moment of hosting my daughter's second birthday party. And it's New York, and, I am literally schlepping, like, carts of stuff from my apartment to the venue across the street, which is like a kids' play place, and, like, I am in such a full body sweat hanging the piñata. By the time people came in, like, I was so fried that I was not present. I was just trying to, like, decompress my nervous system because in a classic New York fashion, it's like 30 minutes to get ready and, and we have nothing, so everything has to be brought in. So it was, um it was that made me really question, like, the real cost of DIY. And, like, now I call it affectionately DI cry, where, like, you're doing all these things, but without support, and support can look like different things. Most people cannot afford a luxury event planner. The unit economics don't make sense for the planner, and they don't make sense for the host, and that's okay. I think tech has this amazing ability to bridge the gap, and that was one of the first times that I experienced, I guess, the more, like, meta human crisis of, like, okay, we're on our phones all the time. We're calling that connection. We are so busy, like, my partner and I both work full time, always have. And so events were becoming this really important backstop in the construct of our lives in terms of human connection. Event could be a dinner party. And I think, especially post pandemic, it could be a birthday party, it could be, girls' night, it could be my sister's engagement party. But the mental cost of actually doing all the planning, and then it was happening in the workspace. I'm like, I am not actually physically present, mentally present. I'm physically present, but I'm not mentally present because of some of the stress and distraction that this is, whether it's taking away from, like, that KPI at work, or whether it's like my daughter wanting me to play with her at the second birthday, but I have to talk to 10 people because I don't have a coordinator. And I just felt like I felt like bringing this luxury, like little snippets of his luxury, to people in different use cases wasn't just about, like, wedding planning anymore. It was about, like, the ability to be present. And that I believe in and have enough conviction to build a company around and to endure what a startup journey is for. Because I think at the end of the day, you know, whether you subscribe to the loneliness epidemic or, what iPhones are connection or not connection, the reality is like, people are lonely, people are depressed, and there's so much science around the power of human connection. Like, if you and I are vibing in person, our neurons are mimicking each other, literally. Like, our brains are designed to connect. Our body treats it like a reward system, like a little bite of chocolate or a workout when we're connecting and laughing and having fun, but even just being around people, physical presence. And it was becoming this incredibly stressful experience. And it felt like such a miss and a problem worthy of solving if we believe, as a mom of three, I'm like, what do I want connection to look like for them? So I know it's like a little hokey of an answer, but it's true. The full body sweat of the pinata and being miserable at the stunning 2-year-old birthday party where I just wanted it to be over as quickly as possible.
I can relate so much to that because
Yeah.
every time my kids' birthdays come up, I'm like stressed the heck out. My
Deadlines.
husband's like, "How many years are we gonna be like hanging this decor?" I'm like up on ladders, like getting all the decor. I mean, it's just a joke. And he's like, we've got to figure out a better way to do this. I mean, it's not efficient. And to your point, like really a lot of what you believe in, and also I believe in, given we're building in similar spaces, is that, you're bringing what used to be a luxury and making it accessible to the masses. Because I completely agree that the current model of, how like event planning and consumerism works today is just, it's broken and it's not working in anybody's favor, given the supply and demand issues. Like there's so much to it, right? Like there's not enough planners, there's more events happening, especially post pandemic. There's just a lot to it, and like the pricing has become such that it truly is a luxury. And why can't we make solutions that are more accessible to to the masses, and allows this like distribution of this type of expertise or type of service to people who deserve it and really should be able to get that level of help. How did you feel that being close to event planning, and even you, I know you continue to do event planning even today, how did you feel that that's been sharpening your decisions with the business and how you operate in the business, how you navigate through this journey and building, being, still actively planning and having planned and being close to the work itself?
It is so critical. I think that, as we build for like to be a planner, essentially our product. The idea is that it is your planner, you know? And so how I can't, sit up in an ivory tower, not that my co-working space is an ivory tower and, hypothesize what that's like. And, I think specifically what's been the most valuable is doing the event days. Yes, the planning process, and there are surprises and things to learn that are really, really valuable, tons of nuance. Um, but actually being on your feet for the 10 to 12-hour day, I think is like a really important rite of passage to be in this space. I actually have everyone on my team do a day, like as a shadow, they shadow or coordinate an event because it gives you a newfound respect for the vendor community and for the planners that are doing this work because it is many times thankless, many times it's not. And one of the things that I learned very early on is that this amazing group of people actually like really cares how your day goes. Like they really care how your event goes. They're very, very invested. And how do you bring that into tech, knowing that like, someone's event budget may not allow for that level of professional sort of support. So it's been really important. I think I would have had a bad hypothesis before. I think it made my bad hypothesis slightly better on how to build it first. And it also just allowed me to test really fast. Like when we launched, I started hourly. Like, that was the model. And if I hadn't tested that way, I wouldn't have learned the, like, operational pitfalls of that. Not necessarily that in theory it's a good idea, like, yes, we learned a lot in that process of what works for both sides, and it actually didn't work for us. If somebody else cracks it, like, more power to you. Um, then we tested, we've tested 17 different things, and I think, like, but by leading and doing as a founder, every time we do any sort of product tweak or change, I go back into even doing our sales consultations with like consumers or SMBs because I want to hear, and I don't say I'm the founder because then they'll just like tell you it's great. But I think getting that, yeah, just like, yeah, I've been working here, it sucks. No, I'm kidding. But, um, no, but it's really important. And I think, as much as you can create great process for people to share that feedback with you, there's nothing like hearing it firsthand. So I think that that's like a good founder lesson. In my world, it just happened to be like go out and actually do the events. Um, I'm not an event planner by trade, but I still go out and will do a couple of days of events just to make sure that I like stay close and stay reminded of what that actually means versus like tech and this would work like just making sure like we keep it real.
I love that, and again, this is why I think you and I come from such similar paths, even just in getting to this point of building. Like, I was working full time, not an event planner by trade, but I was like, I'm gonna just start planning and grabbing my own, like booking my own clients, just so that I could do my own version of like market research before actually building. Because I think that's just in tech. I love that you do this as a rite of passage to anyone that joins your team, because there is truly nothing that prepares you for standing on your feet for literally hours on end, and you do not have the option to sit down. Not only that, you're doing things like picking up the trash after the event or during the event. Like, there's truly things that you just don't even think about if you're on the other side of it, because it goes so unnoticed. Like, these people are trained in doing it so undercover, so slyly, so discreetly, that you don't even know that that might be some of the stuff that like the event planner you hired is doing, right? And so truly doing it yourself just gives you such a different perspective that nothing can prepare you for otherwise.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had a good friend who started like restaurants and this person like, started bussing and, like, waitering, and, like, I took that as, like, a good point of inspiration, and that I think that again, I think especially in tech, especially in Silicon Valley, there's this, like, "Oh, idea, problem to solve, I would use this," and I think that's great, like, sometimes being blind, like, I think it's the right combination of, like, I don't have a background in this, but I rolled my sleeves up, and it sounds like you similarly, where, you had an idea of what the need and problem to solve was, but had you not gone in there, you would have probably made a lot of expensive mistakes too by not getting in the detail.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I truly think it's like the best way, or the best first step to building is put yourself in the shoes of either your customer or one of the stakeholders who you're building for, because you're never going to understand unless you do that first. It's like a must. And I say this to like every founder. If I talk to anybody who's like, where should I start? Side hustle as your customer. Like, be your customer, create a side hustle that is your customer. Even if you don't have the background, just do it. Figure it
Well,
out. Just go do it.
just test. I think
Just
the idea of
test.
testing, like, people get really, protective of ideas and very heavily committed to their idea. And I probably was like this as well, but I was actually talking to a founder the other day, and they're like, "Okay, like, but don't say anything." And I'm like, "Ideas are just ideas." You know how many people have ideas? Like, you gotta go test it, you gotta build it, like, no one like, the idea, no one's, like, sitting around I mean, maybe these things really happen, I don't know, but I've never heard of, like, something like that was a great unless you were, like, the competitor with millions and millions of dollars of funding, just, like, wrong room, you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, there's so much detail and grit that separates an idea from a business that,
Mhm. I couldn't agree more. Just go put it out in the world. Do it. Be the customer. Put your product out.
just start.
Just
Just start.
start.
It's always
Exactly.
my advice is, I talked to a young woman who actually used to coordinate for us, who is, like, brilliant, and she's in pharmacy school, and she has a business idea for something in her field of study, and she's like, "So where do I start?" I'm like, "You just do something every day." That's where you start. You just do something every day. Like, I can give you 10 things I think you should do, but the reality is, like, there's no, like, "Okay, I have a business. This just happened." I think that goes without saying, but I think sometimes it is glamorized, and sometimes you just start. You just take the call. I love the Rent the Runway story. They started with a trunk show just to prove that people would rent dresses, and they racked up all their personal credit card debt to, like, buy these dresses and to rent them in this one trunk show. But it's like, that is what it takes. There is no pretty, like, story here.
There's no playbook, there's no step by
Yeah.
step. It truly just is experiment, test, fail, learn, go through the iterations that you have to go through, get tossed
Yeah.
around. You mentioned that you went through tested 17 different versions of the product and assumptions. What was the very first version of Mostest? Because I know you guys have come quite a long way in terms of
Ooh,
iterating and, molding the platform and the product. So I'm curious, just to be able to even highlight how far you've come, like, what was the very first
it was
version of
hourly.
that?
It
Okay.
was hourly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was hourly.
It was hourly planning services
Yeah, it
that
was
you would
like, "Hey,
offer.
girl, like, you need help with these 10 things, like, just book the hours you need." Yeah.
And what assumptions in that turned out to be wrong? Like, where were you guys pinpointing, or when did you pinpoint that, okay, we're maybe not on the exact right path, or like our initial assumptions maybe weren't accurate? And I guess to that end, when did it feel like it started to click where you felt, okay, now we are on the right path? We're actually, we should be moving forward on this lane and pushing in this lane rather than perhaps maybe the like 16 other lanes that you guys tested before.
I think we're still testing and learning, full disclosure, but I think that, there's definitely a difference in feeling, and some of it how you do, like, kinda and you know this, obviously, like, have to be data obsessed. It's not like you get 15 customers that call you and tell you they're obsessed with you, although reviews are amazing. But we started hourly, and the oversight for us there was primarily just the operational piece. Um, that would I be like the thing to that like I didn't think about. Let me just say, like, it wasn't actually the biggest problem with it, but it was the thing that I didn't think about, right? And what I learned in that is that it's too complicated for people to think through how many out like it's like and then we evolved from that to making a recommendation of hours for deliverables, right? And the goal of this is like you're taking a service and this is sort of like pre-AI where like really these talented event planners, it has to be worth their time. So there has to be a time cap on what they're willing to do. So we're trying to protect them. And I actually think the biggest mistake in that model was not really being clearly or like clear enough early on who like really we served. And because you can serve both, of course, but like what problem are you solving? Are you solving supplementary work for planners or are you solving the pinata sweat? full body sweat. Like, and for me, because I was in learning mode, and I approached it with a lot of curiosity, I think I waffled at first. And so I think that, that was one piece of it. And then I think the simplicity thing, like, is real. Like, then we shifted to sort of just like, here is the deliverable, and you can hedge. You can say things like, for up to 30 days, because, the pushback, from the professional community was like, they just, of course, didn't wanna get taken advantage of and overinvest time in a way that wouldn't be worthy of, like, their value that they were bringing. So, creating the right guardrails, and that led us to, I mean, AI's sort of changed the game in that, for us, in thinking about, like, the sheer hours it takes to plan, a wedding, as an example, can take up to 500 hours to plan, which is 3 months of a full-time job for those keeping score at home. So when people are like, "Oh, it feels like a full-time job," guess what? It is actually a full-time job for 3 months, especially at the beginning. Um, so in thinking about that as the context, for us, it was like, how do we take away as much of that work as possible, but allow them to stay true to their vision, but not necessarily for us have to do the admin or the research or, how do we provide some level of, like, really vetting vendors, not just, like, letting them pay to play for, X amount of dollars and, trying to actually be the tech that represented the planner in lieu of those being able to have a traditional planner. But then also giving those the opportunity to have a little concierge support too if they want that.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice, right? Like you have to know who you're serving. And I, like you, went through the process of waffling. And I think that's just part of it because
It's like learning.
you're
Yeah.
trying to figure out where is the biggest pain point and what is the value that you can best deliver on. And, how are these stakeholders working together and how do you fit into that picture, especially in event planning, because there are so many stakeholders. There's vendors and venues and planners and consumers. And it's actually a really complicated space, I think, to be building in because, and maybe that's why it's so underserved because people just don't want to touch it given the complexity of it. But it truly means that you have to go through the iterations and the evolution and kind of waffle between where is where is your place amongst all these stakeholders and how do you play a role in that? I'm so curious, like what internally had you, like what signals kept you feeling I need to keep iterating instead of quitting?
I think that, I have never liked the word pivot. Like, I think it's a little bit, I don't know, unrealistic to think that business models aren't going to evolve tremendously, probably forever, but certainly in the first 5 years of business. Certainly in the first, like, earlier, more pivoting, right? And so I think I just, like, because I don't come from a Silicon Valley tech background, I think I just was more, like, practical in the sense that I was like, "Okay, that didn't work. Well, let's try it this way. Okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try it this way." I didn't see it as, like, this pivot that was a failure. Like, someone the other day was like, "Oh, you guys pivoted." I'm like, "Well, we just do this." Like, yeah, but, like, also, what is that word? Like, I don't know. I also grew up doing dance. Like, I know what a pivot is, and it's not the right word. It's not.
Nobody's pivoting. We're not in a Friends episode. We're not pivoting around a
We're not
corner of the
pivoting, we're
couch.
evolving. The business model evolves with more knowledge and insights, and if you're listening to who the product is solving a problem for and other relevant stakeholders, like, if it's not evolving rapidly, I think that's a bigger red flag. I think that's what gets people to quit early, honestly. I think it's sort of like this mentality where, like, "Okay, here's our hypothesis," and, like, setting all these guardrails, and maybe I've been guilty sometimes of, like, pulling it too quick, but I'm also just like, I don't know, I think you have to move and shake a little faster, you know?
I love that you said that because I am in Silicon Valley and I can tell you that the pressure to feel like you need to speak the language and represent yourself in that way where like yes this was the pivot and it was boxed within like where this is when the pivot started and this was when the pivot ended and like that's what happened during that
And
time
yeah,
because
totally.
that's how
Me too.
You have to present, it's almost like this like societal pressure, especially in Silicon Valley, where you have to present it that way.
I
Otherwise, you're
see
not
that.
like explaining the story correctly, or there's some sort of stigma around, the how do you explain it? And if it's not that, then what is it? But I completely agree with you. Like, what is a pivot really? You have to be doing these evolution cycles. Maybe it's a cycle, but it's not a pivot, but those
A
cycles are
trail of
natural.
breadcrumbs. It's a trail
Yeah.
of breadcrumbs, like, that's really the journey I feel like I've been on. It's like trail of breadcrumbs, and then tech evolves, and the market evolves, and, all these different things. Yeah.
I feel the same way. I actually use that phrase. Like if somebody asks me, how are things going or what has this been like? I literally describe it as exactly that. I'm just following the breadcrumbs. Like I go to the next breadcrumb and I'm like, what's over here? Like, what do we do now? How do we scale this wall? Right. Like it
Yeah.
truly is following the breadcrumbs and going where, you're learning and you kind of see what the paths are in front of you. And you're like, okay, I'm going to go down this path because this feels to be the best path. But that doesn't mean that you can't then turn and be like, well, whoops, I should have probably gone down this. I mean, there's ways to do it in a smarter way that's most effective for the business, of course, but it's a natural progression of, I think, especially early stage startups, 100%.
And what about you? What's kept you going? I'm curious to hear your answer to that too.
Yeah. I love when I get asked questions. I think for me, I never saw another option. Like I was so convicted in the problem that and this is also part of my how I've operated in life and part of my kind of DNA as well, I suppose, and it's an innate quality, but I just once I had seen the problem, I never saw another option in terms of like what I wanted to do with my life and, my career. And that has kept me going. I've never thought like, oh, what if I would have stayed at that full-time job? Or like, what if I did this now? Or what if I was over here doing this? Or like, I don't know, become an influencer. Like that was never my thing. I've always been committed to this in a way where like my blinders are on and there was no other option given the amount of passion I have in this space, the amount of conviction I have in the problem. And you have to have that level of tunnel vision. And like I feel like that's the only way you keep going because if you start to get curious or you start to like think what's outside of the bounds of like solving for this problem, I think that starts to take you away and you get distracted and there's other shiny objects on the side, but for me, it was just there's never another option. And also, like, as a mom, I I want to show my kids what it means to see out what you're convicted in, right? Like play it out, watch it happen and actually like go down the path. And I think it's an example I want to set for my kids. It's also something like I said is innately in me, but um once you go down this path, you've invested your time, your energy, you're showing your kids something if you have kids or your family, like everyone's supporting you and on board. And it's like, I've already gone so far. I want to see this through and I want to continue on and I'm put my blinders up and just keep going. And it's you have to have the ability to like not be tapped on the shoulder and like fall in another direction or like go with the wind wherever the wind takes you. It's like truly standing very strong in your conviction and in your purpose of solving this problem and just keep going.
I love what you said there because, like, conviction isn't being stubborn. It's like you're just staying in the game. Like, you never stop believing the problem's real. That doesn't mean you haven't changed business models, repositioned, rebuilt it. Like, those aren't pivots, those are evolutions, but, like, the hypothesis on the problem, I actually think that's the biggest thing to prove in early stage is that you're right about the problem.
Absolutely.
You're probably wrong about how you're gonna solve it. Or you
Yes.
are wrong, like, you're wrong. Like,
Yes.
it's
We
fine.
were wrong in the beginning. I
I was
mean,
definitely wrong, or a few ti like, still like, like but, like, the problem's real, and that's, I
yes.
think, the validation, the breadcrumbs, worthy of following.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How did you, in the early days and even now, balance your intuition and what you felt you wanted to do with the product and the company with market feedback and what you were hearing from planners, consumers, and what you were seeing in the market? How did those two things go hand in hand?
Um, yeah, so twofold, like, early on, I was very subject to investor feedback. impacting my confidence and not conviction, but confidence in what we were doing. And I think that's normal in a way because you're a new company, you need the money, and you're sort of like, I know that this is a big problem. I've looked at the market. I understand the market dynamics. Like I know this is what we're trying to do, a venture scale business, but they're telling me this very strong feedback. And what I have learned respectfully is to not care what investors say. And I know it sounds harsh, like because we work with some of the best investors who give us the best feedback and have helped us evolve in the direction we've gone. So it's not maybe fair to say not listen, but when you're pitching, you just take it as data. They are, a fraction of a percentage as invested in this market and understanding that you are, and they've seen some stuff. So it's like, what can I learn from that? And I think the biggest unlock for me has been thinking about all feedback just as data, like removing the emotion from it fully and also making sure like I allow the good data to be there too, because I think as at least for me, like I will zoom so in on what's wrong with the business model and what we could be doing differently. And sometimes I don't like also unpack the good. And I think actually you miss things clinically when you do that too. Kind of like, asking for feedback. Feedback can look two different ways. It can tell you, do more of this because I really liked that. And I think that's the feedback we missed at first because I was so like committed to taking on any piece of constructive criticism and making sure that we were actioning it. I actually think some of doubling down on what we were really good at, I probably missed early on because I was kind of being our harshest critic. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think as an early stage founder, to an extent, you cannot let VC dictate your strategy. You will find investors who understand you and believe in you and understand the vision. And oh, by the way, that all like we already like said, like is all gonna change anyway. So it's really, I think, actually finding investors who fully buy in on the problem, who can then buy in on you and your team and kind of like figure the rest out later. But I let it steer me. And I think that was a distraction for a time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're alone. I have felt the same pressures, especially as a first time impressionable founder, right? It's so you want to become an investor pleaser. You're no longer a people pleaser. You may be an investor pleaser because you need the money and you need the capital, but it's so difficult to fight against that, especially in the early days until you learn the lesson that it is sometimes just the only way you're going to survive is by kind of picking through the noise, figuring out what is really critical to listen to and what isn't, because you're pitching so much and you're pitching, hundreds, if not more, investors at a time. And each person has their own feedback and their own opinions and their own, critiques of what you're building and what you should be doing and the direction you should take this in. And it's
Yeah.
so
And if they want to
easy.
invest and go on that journey with me, like, let's go. But otherwise,
Y Yes, I
like,
completely agree, and I've had the
yeah.
same experience. How did you frame up weddings and events as a, defensible market, especially given this is a a vertical that it has been underserved with innovation and technology, and, I'm curious how you framed it for your investors, and also, like, were there common objections you were hearing and some that you were like,
Or
"I'm just not gonna listen to this," or I feel that this is maybe not as critical," and what might have those been?
yeah, so I mean, the number one thing to watch out for, I think, in the wedding market is a high customer acquisition cost. And then the second objection or watch out is the repeat behavior. Hopefully, if all goes well, they're not getting married all the time. But I think what's changed in the market, so for us, we never intended to just do weddings. So our hypothesis has evolved quite a bit, but it really was thinking about weddings as a wedge because it is for like, and we both spoke about like our individual experiences. I don't think it's uncommon for it to be the first time in a specifically, and many times female woman who is making these decisions the first time she thinks about hiring a professional planner. So there is this entire ecosystem built around wedding planning. And so going and advertising there and acquiring customers, like, yes, it can be expensive, but it also is a really easy way to sort of infiltrate your target market and really positioning it more as a wedge than as we're a wedding planning business. And it's been true. I think the curveball has been, if you were to write this business plan a few years ago, you would say, first comes love, second comes marriage, third comes the baby and the baby carriage. Like, you would say, oh, this consumer is now going to have us plan a kids party or a baby shower. And what we saw actually is that this power couple takes us into the workplace next. That has been the biggest interesting sort of curveball that has
Mm.
debunked a lot of the hesitancy that we received around just even touching the wedding space, because they are bringing us into their place of work, usually while engaged, and then being able to show that repeat transaction behavior in a short amount of time is actually an incredibly strong signal of highly repeatable product market fit. Um, the customer acquisition thing, it being expensive, I think that any consumer business is going to have questions around how do you scale this? And like, color me biased, I think events are a big hack for consumer brands. For us, even as we're targeting B2B, B2B2B, and B2B2C, like, we are thinking about events as our number one go to market because the actual conversion down the funnel from awareness to action, that in partnerships, like, there is, I mean, this user, whether they're in a business use case or a consumer use case, they are getting so much content delivered to them at such rapid speed. I don't know the number. I know people used to say 10. I think it's much higher now. The chance of you actually like penetrating digitally, I think is a much it's a pretty low intense way to do it, and I think you're gonna spend. So I think it's actually a really fair concern for an investor. I think staying away from weddings in total, I would say for a business that's thinking about weddings, think about milestones instead of weddings because you don't wanna do all that work, develop the relationship with the user, and then ultimately, like, not have a continued relationship with them, and that doesn't need to be right away, but I think that is also a fair challenge in terms of thinking about the business plan and what does evolution look like because of that initial investment and how much trust building goes into them trying your product, especially for such a high stakes personal event. I think showing how it evolves from this to that. And you see the not do that. They've acquired companies that reflect different milestones throughout. You see Zola take a swing at it with Zola Baby Registry, so they're seeing it, but I think they're seeing it maybe too late. Not obviously because they're buying everyone. But um, I think that thinking about that is a really thoughtful part of your business plan and earlier than you think before you're a wedding brand would be
Yeah. We experienced the same thing. And I would say what it has been like really helpful is really the education on the fact that wedding planning and that process is not that different from other milestone events,
at
largely
all.
that are s- on the scale all the way from like wedding to funeral, right? And even corporate events. Corporate events has a little bit of a different design aesthetic and like just different kind of design needs. But even some of those, like to your point,
Unless
right?
it's a
Like brand
marketing
events.
event or a
Yeah,
marketing or an
exactly.
influencer
Even
event, like, yes
those.
and yeah, yes and no,
Yeah,
and I will tell you, like, we've done finance events for their LPs that have had
totally.
flowers and, like,
Exactly.
custom furniture rentals and favor like, yes and
Exactly.
no.
It's you're creating an experience and that experience is not isolated to weddings. It's really across the spectrum of all event all event categories and the process to plan and the logistics and the needs and the problem space is not different across those categories, right? Like the same things happen, the same problems are experienced by the consumer and by the businesses or whoever the end user is and
Yeah,
it really is such a similar process and I think like it was even like an opportunity for us to educate in investor discussions or with whoever we were talking to any stakeholders that to your point weddings could be the most relatable wedge because everybody knows a wedding and everybody
and we'll think of it as an entry
likely
point.
likely has
Yeah,
experienced it either their wedding or they've been to a wedding, right? Like it's the most like oh weddings we know what how like that's a painful process but the process is the same if you're planning your daughter's bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah like that
or your
process is the
company
same.
offsite or
Yes.
your yeah, one of the what was when we actually were hired by a nonprofit, yesterday to do a 3-day nonprofit series. There's a cocktail reception the
There
first
you
night.
go.
There's a golf tournament the second day. Like, it is a 3-day event for charity.
Truly.
And, like, that is a way I mean, And I think about, like, yeah, frame weddings as your entry point because there's a lot of data to support it's the first time this ICP searches for something and doesn't just
Exactly.
do it themselves. So I think that is how you kinda get around the, like, wedding scar tissue. But the reality is, like, all investors have their thing. So I think that, one of the great things about events right now is that it's accelerating, whether you're looking at personal celebrations, business celebrations, whether you're looking in the US, Europe, small to mid-size mega events, sports events, personals, like, they are all growing at a double-digit CAGR. And, I don't know that it's not post-pandemic demand anymore. This is, I think, this next generation saying exactly where we started, which is that we're invested in real human connection. So there will be tools for this and they will need, and maybe they'll search for it before their wedding, but I think there's a pretty strong, data backed case to say that a lot of times the first time you're going to get someone high intense to actually book something might be their wedding because they're actually finally just overwhelmed enough to not take it on.
Absolutely. I mean, to what I've always said and learned through this process is that it's the first time people are usually planning at that scale. Like, usually, if you're planning something, it's never at the scale of a wedding. Although post wedding, there are many milestones and many
On and
events
on
that
and
are
on. Yeah.
of
Oh,
of
yeah.
that scale. So it's sort of like an inflection point of like, oh, now I understand what it means to plan at that scale, and now I do that, in follow on milestone events, but or even corporate events. But before that, because of the age or because of just like life chapters before a wedding, you're usually not planning events at that scale. Also, just budget wise, like usually, when you're getting married is like generally the life chapter where like you suddenly have maybe perhaps a larger budget and, things are changing in
Complexity.
life. Yeah, complexity in life, just so many things have changed during that period. So I totally agree. It's the first time people are usually experiencing that level of planning.
I also think it's like the role as a wife, at least for me, has been like now my role in my family system is different. Like I'm no longer a passenger of events, I'm planning them. And similarly, it's also simultaneously happening typically with more women in the workforce than ever as our careers accelerate. So it's not, it is like I think a timing thing just based on the average age one does get married, where all of a sudden it's like a perfect storm. But as like the married sister, as an example, like I then was in charge of the bachelorette parties for my sister. Just
Yeah.
there's no that's like harder to prove. But I do think about like if you think about an event planner as like, not the traditional trade, but as like someone like you or I who like to host events, you think about that as like I like to think of it as a community connector. Like I can be at times my family's community connector, which means my parents' 40th wedding anniversary is this year. We are planning an event for that. And that's one of a dozen examples I can think about that have happened since I got married, not before.
Yep.
So I think it's an interesting thing as you think about who this person is, who is actually the payer of what you're looking to do and just where they are in their life. I think actually quite the opposite. You can almost flip the wedding script into, like, a pretty compelling case as to why you should be marketing there first.
Absolutely. You mentioned you were growing your family while you were growing Mostest. I know you guys are still growing, but like that, you were building your family in parallel. What did truly 0 to 1 look like for you in the business as a mom of three? What did a typical day, week, month look like for you?
I'm gonna say things that are gonna be pretty controversial, and they're not what I recommend to do, but, like, I'm gonna answer, the question really honestly. It meant opening my laptop at the hospital. Like, that is what it meant, and not resentfully, like, I love building, so I think if I was, like, back in my corporate job and I had to open my laptop at a hospital, I would have had a conniption, but, like, because I love what I'm doing, I was kinda like, "Okay, baby's sleeping. I'm gonna plug in," and that was just that's my nature, I am obsessed with this business, and that has meant a lot of integration. I brought Audrey, my youngest, to a wedding to oversee a setup with me when she was, like, 2 weeks old.
Wow.
Yeah, and, there's a whole story behind that, but I have a firm belief that, especially my girls, seeing me build is a good thing. and not to try. I don't believe in work-life balance as a founder. I think it's very different as a contributor, but I think if you have decided to build something and really depending on what your ambitions are for it, but for me, like, I, I'm, like, leaving it all on the field, but that isn't gonna come at the expense of my time with my kids. And because these moments and years with them as young people are flying. I actually think being my own boss has given me so much freedom to do that, where if I was in the traditional confines of a corporate environment, you kinda have to show up at this time, you kinda leave at this time. Oh, this meeting is, a traveling meeting that's non-negotiable, so, like, at the end of the day, I can say no. And that is, like, I think the power of, like, being a female founder, mother, parent. That doesn't mean that I'm working less. That's absolutely not it. This is not a lifestyle business, but I do believe that that autonomy in parenthood, like, and not feeling anxious if my kid's sick on a big day, like, I just cancel. It is what it is, that for me was, like, actually really, really, like, a huge stress relief.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience in in this regard to you as well, because I too was growing my family in the early days of the very early days of Gia, and you know, going through that experience and doing both in parallel, there are such massive trade-offs. Like, you're making sacrifices in that I mean, I'm sure you do this too. Like, I work every night after bedtime, right? Like, my laptop is open, I am working,
Yeah,
but I can log off and do bedtime and control that hour,
totally.
those few hours, because I am, not in a traditional corporate role, which I was in before. So there are such trade-offs, and it truly is that is also to our earlier discussion about like what keeps you going. Because I am so passionate about this, because those trade-offs feel worth it, because I get to show them what it feels to build, something that I love and I am growing and I am so committed and convicted about. But at the same time, I maybe am working every night, or I'm sometimes stressed if I like have to get something over the line and I have to, that takes me away from them perhaps, but ultimately I get that control and I get that final say, and it's so different than what it was if I were to be in a corporate role. So
For sure.
how do you and your partner manage that? And how did you guys manage that in the early days?
In the early days, um, in the early days, it's harder. I breastfed for a little bit of time, and that just like innately is challenging and the lack of sleep. So, a lot of that just falls onto, you know, women, at least in my, dynamic. So it was harder to balance earlier on, but my partner's hands-on. He has a generally flexible, work situation. He's also working more than full time, but he has flexibility. So I think both of us having flexibility has been a bit of an unlock. How about you guys?
We both have very demanding jobs. I mean, me as a
Yeah.
founder and him in a demanding, more corporate role. But I
Yeah.
feel that that balance is actually really great because, he's in the stable position. I'm in more of a riskier position, but we are able to, like, because I'm in the riskier position, I get the flexibility that he maybe wouldn't get. And on the
Yeah.
flip side, I get the stability that I wouldn't get without him. So it
Sure.
definitely is hard to manage. We had a harder time when the kids were younger, but I, like you, had my kid at events. I also was like pumping in a corner.
Well, yeah.
After a setup, I would do a setup and I would like run to the car and pump and like run back out and show back up as if nothing ever happened. And
Yeah.
it was difficult. It truly was difficult, and like finding ways to like escape on a weekend, especially because event planning by nature is on weekends, and you're
Oh,
likely
yeah.
giving up weekends. It made it definitely more challenging in the beginning, for sure. There's no doubt about it. But as time goes on, you kind of just figure it out and you get in a rhythm. And I think the biggest part is us having an understanding that like no matter what, we will figure it out. And like that doesn't mean that I have to sacrifice my dream in building this and he sacrifices something on his end. It's like we both support each other in figuring it out, and that's like a common understanding. No matter how challenging or how hard it feels in the moment, we know that we'll figure it out and we'll figure it out together. And yes, it might feel hard. We just got to push through this like one hard day and it'll get easier on the other side of it. So,
Totally,
yeah,
totally, and every day is different, you know? So it's like some days I am allocating and able to allocate more time, to being present with my kids, and some days I'm working till all hours in the morning, and that's a I think learning to be kind to yourself and not, like, worry about perception or expectations, like, just, like, being and living the life that, like, really fulfills you and, like, how lucky we are to, like, be so passionate about what we do that we wanna work on it.
exactly. That's
Like,
exactly how I feel. I feel so lucky that I get to build what I am. I literally have dreams about it at night and I
totally.
wake up sometimes being like, "Oh, I that was in my dream. I need to write it down."
Yeah.
And but like how lucky are we that we get to experience that? Okay, switching gears a little bit, and I know we're almost at time, but I'm curious what excites you most about where the space is heading, especially given your recent launch with Mostest 2.0 and the AI planner. What excites you about generally where the space is going and the impact that like technology and of course we have to talk about AI, the impact that AI will have on the space, and how do you see that evolving in 5, 10 years from now?
Yeah, I would love for Mostess to be anywhere you think about planning an event. I think about, like, businesses that have scaled. I love, to think about Netflix and, like, they define success as, like, you log in and they know the movie that you want. Like, I think that's the dream here, and we have such a long way to go. But, I think it's just like, I still feel like we're in chapter 1 of this thing. So I'm excited to see what we can do. We have some exciting announcements coming up in the next couple of weeks with some really brilliant technical talent we're bringing on that I think is gonna allow us to, from the product side, really get down to business with some of that. So I'm really excited about that.
That's amazing. Congrats. I know it's a big deal growing the team. Those are big, big announcements and milestones for you guys as a business.
Yes.
What systems do you have in place that avoid you from hitting or feeling burnout? How do you manage? I'm sure what in your head is like your personal to-do list with the kids and the family, the business, all the things going on at this stage. How do you put systems in place to survive that level of growth without feeling burnt out?
I've never been good with systems, like, I'm not gonna have some hack for you on that that's gonna be practical and helpful. I would be totally BSing you if I did. But the 2 thing maybe 3 things. The first is, like, I invest heavily in my female friendships, and that is something that, my therapist, really early on, even before Mostis, she was like, "Your life can't just be a pie of, like, work and family. You need more things in the pie." And, not feeling guilty about that, like, I'm going away with some girlfriends on a wellness retreat Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday,
I love
and,
that.
like, I cannot wait. That is, like, absolutely gonna fill my cup. Just that, like, laughter and female camaraderie for me is, so energizing and fulfilling. Um I try to put my phone away during the brief, like, snippets of time if I am, like, doing pickup and I'm with my kids for 2 hours. I really, like, try to let that 2 hours be fully present. That is something that I think has been it was led by my daughter who was like, "You're always on your phone." She's 8, and I was like, "You're right." So, led by her, but something that's been very mutually rewarding because the ability to be truly present and observant of her words and listening, like, that has deepened the time. So it's not just time, but also just, like, making sure that, like, I'm not performatively spending time with them or performatively spending time on the business when I'm really worried about family stuff. Um, yeah, and I really think the 3rd thing, is pretty cliche, but, like, I'm not exercising all the time, like, it's not realistic, but, like, I am trying to do more of that because at the end of the day, it is making me a better founder and a better family person, friend, all of it because, you would never I don't wanna look back and as much as I love this business, absolutely trashed my physical health
Yeah.
for anything, I think that has been something really even in the last, like, month or 2 I've had to reflect pretty hard on because it's kind of, and I don't know if you feel this way, and I don't mean this as a murder, it was a mistake. When things got busy, I dropped me. Like, I dropped my workouts, I dropped my time with friends, and I think that part of coming back to making this more sustainable has been, like, sort of undoing some of that. We're like, "You know what? Actually, it's okay if I don't do pickup today because I need to go exercise, and it's okay if I need to, like, push that meeting," and, like, making sure that I have my oxygen mask on too for
I
the
want
long haul. Yeah,
Yes, I 100% feel the same way, and also had gone through that reflection experience, especially given it was the new year and like, what do I want this year to look like? Not only for the business, but for me to show up well in all these areas of my life. And I very much put myself last for a long time. And I think that just women, it's like innately in us when we're having kids, especially as founders, like, okay, these are the two top priorities. We're going to come last. That's just a it's like you don't even second guess that. That's just what you immediately default
totally.
to, and it's terrible. It's not a good thing, and I think as you see these, like, startups and these AI startups and all these young founders glamorizing, like, the process and, like, being able to build a business and the glitz and glam of it, you
Yeah.
don't hear enough of, "Okay, but you're, like, you're we need to also prioritize our well-being, and like the mental health as a founder is
Oh,
really
yeah.
difficult, and you need to stay in the right mental space to be able to sustain building and having a family and everything that comes with life."
100. I also think, like, a great network of founder friends. Like, I remember early on when I was trying to meet investors, going to these events and, like, meeting founders and be like, "But where's the we need the money, like, where are the investors?" One, most investment we've gotten has been through an intro from a founder friend. So, like, founder friends are your lifeline. And then the second, that is therapy too. And to being able to call someone and be like, unfiltered version is huge. So you can call me anytime. I feel the same vice versa, but that, like, network is, like, big, I think, in terms of just, like, I feel like I'm developing this group where I could not whine, but simply say, like, "Holy," and just not bring it into my house, not bring it into my work, 'cause, you can't bring it to your team some of the time, so it's like,
Couldn't
yeah,
agree more. It's so important. I mean, you have to fill your cup in that way, whether it's girlfriends, founder friends. You need that outlet. Otherwise, you sit with it. And I have had that experience where it gets lonely and you're sitting with like your thoughts and your feelings, like, what the hell do I do next? Kind of thing. And you need that support system around you outside of just your immediate family for sure. Okay, quick few rapid fire questions. What would you tell yourself at the beginning of year one of building Mostest that you now feel you have clarity on?
just stay curious, don't put a lot of, like, pressure on yourself. I think, like, think of yourself as a researcher for longer, as long as possible.
I love that. Staying curious, I feel like, is the key throughout this entire journey. What do you feel people underestimate about building companies as a mother and a female founder? What do you think is the most challenging part of that? And what would you tell another female founder who may be considering starting a business but also has a family, or starting a family because they while also already having a business? What's the one thing that you think maybe is underestimated or people aren't aware of?
I think that because in many cases, in family systems, a lot of the caregiving falls to women, that in some ways there's an accurate concern that you don't have the bandwidth to start a company, and I think that that is incredibly unfair. Family systems look different case by case, and so I think the feedback is don't assume anything, but also be smart. Like, I don't to an investor, I'm not, and this is right, wrong, or indifferent, I am not, like, talking about my kids with male investors when we're getting to know each other. And not because, I think that they'll be nefarious, I just understand there is unconscious bias that exists, and how we actually change that is by going and building really big companies and making it obvious that moms are the best founders in the game for all the reasons that we know. But I think that I think just be smart, don't be naive. I would say be smart, and then do your part to build up other women from an abundance mindset. There is not enough of us out here raising a venture, out here building, out here, shooting our shot to be competitive. And I have been very lucky to find like-minded women that I really have, like, lifted my business up, made the intro no question, and I feel as though I've become one of those people too. And so I think that, the best way to make change is to, like, do make change in action in the small ways you can, because small ways mean a lot and matter a lot as we try to, change some of the archaic mindset around what we're able to do just because, maybe at one point we weren't able to do it.
Amen to all of that. We're gonna prove 'em all wrong. Thank you, Sarah, for coming on. This was such a pleasure. Before we wrap, where can everybody find you and follow you along with Mostest? Let us know all the places they can find you.
Natasha, it's been so fun getting to chat with you. I absolutely adore what you're building, and I am excited to watch and support alongside. For anyone who's interested in learning more about Mostest, you can find us at joinmostest with a T.com, and the same social handle across all platforms at joinmostest. So, yeah, hit me up, DM me if you have an event coming up, and we'd love to help.
Amazing. We'll link it in the show notes. Thank you so much,
Amazing.
Sarah.
This is so fun.